And so I feel like the idea that women are not sexual leads to a lot of confusion in women, because when we start to have those natural desires, you feel shameful, like I'm not supposed to feel like this, only men are. Pretty much handed that burden of like, well, men can't control themselves, so you must control yourself because whatever you wear might affect these men. Sex is not bad. Having natural desires in your life, even in singleness, is not bad or negative. Dehumanizing men, acting as if men are just these like animals who are sexual creatures and they have no self-control. Let me just say this, God is not afraid of your questions. He designed us to be naturally curious. Hello friends, it's Jara. Welcome back to my channel. If you've never been here before, my name is Jara and I'm so happy that you're here. A lot of my content is going to be centered around healing from shame, breaking out of addiction cycles when it comes to things such as pornography and unhealthy sexual behaviors, and also talking about my faith and my personal testimony and how I'm walking with women in my ministry to help guide them into their own recoveries. If you want to hear more about my ministry and the type of work that I'm doing, click the link in my description below. So I'm excited for the video today. It is something that I think is a topic that tends to be overlooked a lot and not always talked about, but something that has probably affected majority of us if you were raised in the church. So today's topic is going to be talking about the harm of purity culture, the lies that it can portray, and what is the truth according to the Bible and who God really is. So let's get into it. Side note, you might hear my dishwasher in the background because for some reason I always think it's the best time to start the dishwasher right before filming and I always forget, so sorry about the background noise. First, I want to talk a little bit about what does purity culture teach us. Purity culture teaches us a fear around sex. It teaches us that women are not sexual beings, that men have no self-control, and lastly, that you will be shamed if you are curious or ask questions. Purity culture has taught us to have a fear around sex instead of trying to understand it. It's taught us to be afraid of asking questions instead of trying to explore them through a biblical perspective. It's taught women that their worth only comes from their virginity, and it's taught men that lust is unavoidable in them and uncontrollable. This type of culture has kept so many of us living in shame and confusion when it comes to topics around sex. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the fear of sex, because from my personal experience growing up, and now my dog is barking. We're having a lot of good background noise today. In my personal experience growing up with purity culture, the fear of sex was really portrayed to me. That sex was like very secretive, it was a bad thing, but yet I'm supposed to save it for marriage and then somehow it's supposed to be good, and it's really painted in this like fearful light as if sex itself is dirty or wrong, when the reality of it is sex is a sacred gift from God, and it should never be painted as if sex itself is dirty or bad. We can always talk about the distortion of the way that the world portrays sex and how that can become very negative or bring, destructive cycles into our lives. But sex is not bad. Having natural desires in your life, even in singleness, is not bad or negative. It's just the way you respond to those desires. It's crazy because I never heard that growing up. I never heard like having a sexual thought is not bad. It's whenever you turn a natural desire into lingering on it, creating these thoughts of lust and entertaining those type of thoughts is when it can become unhealthy for us. But growing up and you go through puberty and you start to naturally notice the opposite sex and you're naturally attracted to them, or you have that desire of sex as you get older, is not a bad thing. God gives us natural desires and gave us the ability to be attracted to other people. It's just whenever we start to, like I said, turn it and start to really harp on it and entertain those type of thoughts and make them lustful, because there's a difference between just a desire and lust. And so we can see somebody, be attracted to them, and notice that maybe that natural desire comes up, but it's when you start to objectify them, maybe only think of them for their body parts, only start to imagine fantasies around them, that's when it becomes that negative, unhealthy, unbiblical view of sex, if that makes sense. So this type of fear around sex can really create anxiety and confusion for single people. And then for married people, it can be confusing because you grow up with this thought of like sex is bad, and then you get married and all of a sudden you're supposed to switch and you're like, oh, now I'm supposed to enjoy sex. And so that can create a lot of harmful shame and a lot of difficult cycles that you will have to work through later. And so purity culture does not equip us well when it comes to the idea of sex and the fear of it. Next, this thought that women are not sexual beings. I feel like growing up, I was always taught like, well, men are sexual and like, you're just gonna have to learn how to deal with that. And whenever you get married, you'll just have to fulfill their desires. And it was never talked about like, well, women naturally have sexual desires. God created man and woman in his image and gave them the desire to go forth and multiply, right? Right in the beginning of the Bible, that verse tells us that is for both of them, not just for, he didn't say only for Adam's goodness or only for his enjoyment. It is for both. And so I feel like the idea that women are not sexual leads to a lot of confusion in women, because when we start to have those natural desires, you feel shameful, like I'm not supposed to feel like this, only men are. And that also leads to really shameful cycles around pornography addiction and curiosity around sex. Women who maybe had slept around and then had nowhere to turn to or talk to anybody about it because they thought, I'm not supposed to be sexual. I'm not going to be able to even talk about this because I already have the layers of shame of doing what I did. And now there's just going to be more on top of that because I'm not even supposed to have any type of desire at all. And so this type of thinking negatively impacts women so much, negatively impacts young girls so much. This type of thinking creates so much shame and secrecy around women's sexuality, and that does not magically disappear on our wedding night. I remember thinking as a young girl, like when I was struggling with my pornography addiction, oh, not only is pornography bad, and I know that, but I'm the only girl because girls are not sexual, so that just makes me even worse, like even more of a dirty person, even more of isolation, when that just wasn't the reality of it. Up to 60% of women now are struggling in pornography addiction, and up to 45% of Christian women have admitted to struggling with pornography on the regular. So we do have sexual desires, and that is not a negative thing. But whenever we paint it negatively, that therefore brings forth a bunch of other negative behaviors, a lot of secrecy, a lot of shame that falls onto the women. The next one is a doozy, and I'm pretty passionate about this, and I will do other videos talking about this, but the idea that men cannot control themselves and that they are just so sexual that they have no way to contain their desires in their lives. I feel like not only does this affect women because we're pretty much handed that burden of like, well, men can't control themselves, so you must control yourself because whatever you wear might affect these men. And that's honestly the opposite of what Jesus told us. And I obviously believe that we should always look to Jesus in scripture because he's the Son of God. He is the Word of God in human form, and he was there telling us exactly how we should live and replicate the way that he lived his life. And so he did not tell us, women, make sure you cover up because a man might lust after you. Lust was a problem even back then when everyone wore long, very flowy robes. The men and women wore similar garments. And if lust was a problem then, when you pretty much couldn't see any type of outline of anybody's body, how could we act as if now the reason why men lust or have struggles, or there's instances of men taking advantage of women, that it's because of what she's wearing? So not only does it portray that, but it also portrays dehumanizing men, acting as if men are just these like animals who are sexual creatures and they have no self-control. And that is not how a man of God should be. A man of God should have self-control. They should have the fruits of the Spirit, right? And so we need to stop dehumanizing men and stop acting as if they cannot control themselves in any way, Self-control is responsible for every single human, whether you're a man or a woman. And having sexual desires does not mean that self-control goes out the door. It's actually the opposite. Men do not need sex. Sex is not a necessity of life. It's not food or water. It is not the air that we breathe. Men desire sex, just like women desire sex. Maybe they have higher sex drives, but that does not mean that when you get married, it's like, oh, I need to fulfill my husband's every single desire and I'm just there to serve him. And that is not how sex was created to be by God. And lastly, this idea of having shame over questions. Let me just say this, God is not afraid of your questions. He designed us to be naturally curious. There are many parts of the Bible that we may not automatically understand or might be curious as to how that actually works. God created us as humans to have so many layers to us, and especially when it comes to something as big and sacred and important as sexuality, there's gonna be questions, there's gonna be wonderings about things. And even as children growing up, you're gonna be curious about sex, you're curious about your body, you're curious about the other gender. And that is not negative. God gave us that natural curiosity, and He's not afraid to answer our questions. And the Bible is not afraid to be there as a resource to you, for you to look through and understand. The church needs to be there to answer questions, because when we don't equip our people and answer those questions, we're leading to that shame and confusion and wondering why, if this thing is so holy and sacred to God, why am I not able to ask questions about it? Why am I not being able to have support or have a safe space to have these type of conversations? And I think that is so important and so needed in the church. I'm going to be doing a second video to this, talking about what I believe purity culture should be teaching in the church. I'm curious to hear about how purity culture has maybe affected you in your life, if you had similar experiences to me, or maybe you heard different types of verbiage portrayed to you or beliefs portrayed to you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.